Good God, that is idyllic.
Yeah, just, if I'm going to be here, I might as well try to look like I'm in the mountains. Don't come up here and put on a tie or anything,
That's right. So I'm not a huge fan of calling out my quarterback publicly. It just doesn't sit well with me. That's why they created doors and offices. What did you make of Bruce Arians calling out Brady pretty harshly?
I think there's a strategy there. I don't think he's just calling him out just to call him out. I think, when you bring in somebody as iconic as Tom Brady to your team and he has a tough game, if you sugarcoat it, you shield it, that sends the wrong message to the locker room that he is now somehow above everybody else just because of what he's done in the past. And so, I don't think that Bruce Arians will make a habit of doing that. And hopefully he doesn't have the opportunity to do it anymore. But I think that there was a method behind that, and that was just to send a message to the locker room that everybody's accountable.
Listen, every year there's a really good team, and they just fold. It doesn't work, and it's often injury riddled. We saw Seattle last year had cluster injuries to the running backs. Philadelphia cluster injuries to their perimeter players. And I'm looking at Jimmy G in San Francisco. They've run out of wide receivers. Everybody's hurt or out. And Jimmy G was not good, and Kyle Shanahan was not happy with him. And everybody's clobbering the quarterback because we all think Kyle's a genius, and we all have questions with Garoppolo. But I'm watching him, and I'm like, well, of course he's struggling. Everybody's out. Did you ever have a moment in your career where you just like, guys get hurt, same position, and you're just limited, and your game just deteriorates?
Yeah, and it's really, really hard as a quarterback. So, you talk about, quarterback being accurate. I remember a few years ago, there was I can't remember 2-3 years ago, there was some talk about Aaron Rodgers. All of a sudden his accuracy was off and his completion percentage was down. Well, you can only be accurate if you know exactly where you're throwing the ball. I mean, you give me a target, or you give, Jimmy G a target, and he knows the receiver is going to be there at that particular time. It's you can do that and you can be accurate. But if you're not entirely sure where that guy is going to be because you're not familiar with that particular guy and how he moves and how he runs, or maybe he's not consistent in his route running, it's almost impossible to be accurate if you don't know exactly where the guy's going to be. And so, having a cluster of injuries like that, it makes it very, very difficult on a quarterback, because in order to function efficiently, you got to know exactly where guys are going to be at exactly what time they're going to be there. If they don't get healthy, and particularly if George Kittle is going to be hurt here for a little bit, it makes it really, really difficult as a quarterback.
Yeah, Brandon Ayuk, the rookie's out. Deebo Samuel out. Jalen Hurd out for the year. Tavon Austin hurt. George Kittle limping. Sorry, folks. It's just not easy, especially in the NFL. The game is just faster, quicker. Guys are moving. To Drew's point, it disrupts everything. So go back to your rookie start. I thought Joe Burrow was mostly really good. I really liked him a lot. What did you make of it, and what was your first start like? I mean, you would think he would be nervous.
Well, my first start was at Buffalo when they were just coming off, I think it was their third Super Bowl. So I'm standing there playing catch, and I see Bruce Smith come down the tunnel, and then I see Cornelius Bennett come down the tunnel. And you talk about nervous, man. I almost wanted to walk off the field, man. These guys were terrifying. But I finally settled in and played a little football. And the thing that I liked watching Joe Burrow was just how comfortable he looked playing, right? He did not look like the game was moving too fast for him. It didn't seem like he was out of sorts, or uncomfortable with the speed of the game. I really thought that he looked really good in his first start. And I think the future is really, really bright for the kid. Love everything about him.
We've talked about this. Drew Bledsoe joining us, 14 NFL seasons, drafted number 1 overall by the Patriots, played Parcells, Pete Carroll, Bill Belichick. It's funny. So this past weekend, I've been kind of critical of Pete Carroll last 2 years. I've said, listen, I know we all love Richard Sherman and Marshawn Lynch and Pete Carroll, but I feel like by year 2, this was really Russell Wilson's team. But Pete's a defensive guy, old school guy, little reluctant to take the reins off. I honestly felt this weekend it was the first time that Pete said, from the first play, go. 9 for 9 first quarter. So go back to your career. Belichick was a defensive guy. Parcells, defensive guy. Pete Carroll, defensive guy. Drew, you know this. You've lived in this world where, hey, Drew, don't lose the game. I felt Pete Carroll this weekend turn the page a little. Take me to what's that like, being a quarterback with a defensive coach.
Yeah, it's not ideal. I never did have an offensive head coach, which that would have been kind of cool to have a guy that just builds around the offense first rather than the defense. But ultimately, what it comes down to is every coach ultimately wants one thing: they want to win. For me in my second year with Parcells, we led the league in pass attempts with Bill Parcells. We had one game we threw it 70 times in one game.
Wow.
He took the reins off when I was in my second year because that was ultimately what we needed to do to win. We were giving up some points on defense and weren't running the ball great, so we would come out and just throw it around. I also threw a few interceptions that year, which contributed to some close games. But with Pete, Pete's a smart guy. He's a great football coach, Hall of Fame football coach. And at some point you've got to realize what you have in Russell Wilson, which is one of the all-time great quarterbacks. And the other thing that's unique about Russ that should give Pete some comfort is that he doesn't make very many mistakes. He really doesn't turn the ball over. So that's always the risk that defensive coaches point to, is if you throw it a bunch, you're going to turn the ball over. Well, Russ doesn't really turn the ball over very often. And so you can take the reins off him a little bit without having a huge risk attached to that.
Couple of minutes left. OBJ, another bad Sunday. I've said this for about a year. It feels like Baker's forcing it, and I do think sometimes with a veteran star receiver, a young quarterback feels like he's got to feed him. He's got to take care of him. How long would you let OBJ and Baker work before you finally said, you know what, I can get something for OBJ? How long do you let it cook?
Yeah, there can be that motivation to try to force the ball to a guy that has a pedigree and has been around for a while, and I do get that sense a little bit that they're trying to a little bit too hard to get the ball to one guy rather than just letting the offense come to him. Their coordinator up there is Alex Van Pelt, who was my backup in Buffalo. He's a great guy. I love him to death. And Alex is a really no-nonsense guy. And I think if that is truly a problem, I would expect Alex to address that as an offensive coordinator first and foremost. And then if somehow that doesn't get solved, then maybe you look at doing something. But it's one game against arguably the best defense in the entire NFL. So probably don't need to jump the gun on sending a guy packing based on one game. But if it becomes a problem through the course of the season, I could see something happening.
Doubleback.com, great winery. Drew Bledsoe is in the mountains. He looks rustic. He looks experienced. It's like if like a grizzly bear ran into your picture right now, you would wrestle it to the ground and save your small community, wouldn't you? That's just what you look like right now.
I absolutely would, yeah. The grizzly bears, they're scared already, so they don't even come around anymore because I choked